there's a variety of limits that we have in terms of what cell towers, what the emissions of cell towers are allowed to be in different countries. And as well, there's actually different limits in relation to the phones. And these are two separate kinds of limits. And it is quite technical and complicated actually, but for the 900 megahertz, if you can see, the United States allows, in terms of what's allowed to be in the air, the environmental levels, among the highest, along with many other countries actually, in the world. And there's several European countries that have lower limits set for precaution, whereas China and Russia have set them based on knowledge of biological effects at non-thermally relevant levels. And India dropped their levels to 1/10 of what they were after doing a review of the impacts to birds and bees. And we have a page on our website at ehtrust.org on international actions where you can learn more about that and see what all the different countries are doing. I can't go into this, but I wanted to point a few things out. This is just a very, just some examples. And that is that there are, such as Russia and actually over a dozen countries, have very strict limits or policies related to the amount of magnetic field EMF allowed near homes or new construction or schools. And then different countries have different regulations related to Wi-Fi, which is banned in nursery schools in several countries or restricted in France and Israel. And there's a variety of different laws moving forward. It's changing all the time, and we try to keep up and update our website pretty regularly if you're interested in that. And then there are countries where they are loosening regulations. So just the basics before I go in depth, and I don't know if you can see in my house, we have all of these things, like a corded phone. But in design, in terms of where the location is, keeping it at a distance from high EMF sources like power lines or cell antennas or substations. And then internally, in terms of all your systems, you want to choose low EMF or no RF, not the wireless security system, even with HVAC. And we just moved into a house. We have redone the entire HVAC. I've been personally deep in this road, actually. We put in all hardwired connections in the wall with an electrician. We have an off switch for a lot of our electrical electricity in the bedrooms, as well as some things which are in metal cables to decrease the electric fields. So you want to think about having phones. If you're going to have wired phones, all of this needs to be planned in advance. And then kind of at a minimum, having that low EMF sleeping area where everything can be turned off. Have a minimal use of wireless in the building or in your home, and creating a low EMF computing workstation for where we do all of our work. I am on the computer all day long, more than I should be, but it's all as low as possible for me. And I also have a switch plate here. This is like what we have in our house. So we have both the phones. I have 2 phone lines, and we have 2 Ethernets. And I always recommend having 2 or 3 or more Ethernets for every room, just because I've got 2 kids, and you know, one line is not enough. If I were to do it over again, I'd do that in every room. So the Collaborative for High Performance Schools in 2014 came out with criteria, and I'm going to go over that. It's in the paper, and I think it's pretty much the basics. To measure, you want to measure and have the ELF, magnetic fields, at a level that is lower than that's linked to childhood leukemia. So for the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, they have 1 milligauss for new construction, 2 milligauss for existing. In many cases, if you have high magnetic fields, that can be addressed by fixing common wiring errors. And I'll send that to everyone so you can pass that along. Of course, if you're near a power line, that's a different ballgame, and there's not really a way to address that. And we have no limits in the United States on magnetic fields at all. And the fields that were linked in the Kaiser Permanente research that Deborah talked about were about at 3. So this is an area that we really need to address in the United States. I just conversed with the EPA that confirmed they have not looked at this since 1980s. And this is a gaping hole in accountability, among other issues. So positioning, especially in schools, supply rooms, the building power, where all the electrical stuff is going to be, should not be near where you are living most of the time. Even in our house, I specifically chose this house because all of the electrical, all those components were in the near where the bathrooms were in terms of the 3 levels, and it was as far away as possible from where we were sleeping. In California, after the research that they did, which has been terminated and defunded for many years now, they do have the guidelines for the Department of Education with setbacks for power lines, actually. In terms of your computers, and there's like this connection between the building and also what people do in the building. Because you can have everything low EMF in terms of magnetic fields, but then you have kids in schools who place those laptops on their lap, as I did for years, not knowing that that would be not a good idea, right on the abdomen, right on your reproductive organs, and you're going to get magnetic fields and electric fields from that laptop, even if it's hardwired. So the devices need to be on the table. There's all of this lifestyle and behavioral work that needs to be done, you know, maybe signs posted about, you know, here's how you use your devices. All the equipment should come with Ethernet ports and a physical switch to disable the wireless. There's a wired internet system, as I talked about, throughout the building. There have been a lot of discussions, glad to talk at another time, about how do you hardwire an office? How do you hardwire, and I mean with a lot of people, of course, all offices were always hardwired previously, and in secure settings, they're always hardwired because it's faster, safer, and more secure to be going through a wire rather than through wireless. But in the schools, it really does present a challenge. There are schools that are hardwiring, and we had a presentation by the IT chief of Haifa in Israel talking about how he did it. We have those plans up on our website at ehtrust.org as well. And wired phones, which I talked about. And also just remember that cordless phones, like, I don't know if you can see in my little picture, but decked phones like this also emit radio frequency radiation. And often, I know what I found out when I got a meter was that, in fact, my biggest source was this right in my face all day at my office. And so now we have a corded phone with a cord in all of our rooms. In terms, I think you're already aware of this, but in terms of a low EMF sleep sanctuary, not having screens, wireless and electronics, TVs, all of that not in the bedroom. Also, not having electrical cords running underneath the bed or situating those electrical points so that they're not going to be, you're not going to have like all these lines and lamps and all of this, which has all this electricity running. There are special little on-off switches you can put, as well as Christmas timers on lamps. I use a low blue light reading lamp at night to read, which I like to do. Don't forget about gaming consoles, battery-powered alarm clock, and no screens at least at really 2 hours before bedtime. I can't say that I always follow that myself because I'm always working, but I do have blue light protection on my screens. I use both the internal software to reduce the flicker in the blue light, as well as an external screen with, I have a couple kinds. One is 100% blue light blocking and some are partial, depending on what I'm doing. We're not even touching blue light, but that's a whole critical issue, and we have a lot of that on our website as well. You don't want to have the utility meters and the electrical panels near the bedroom. especially on the other side of the wall. And there's also the demand switch. And I wish my house was pre-wired with the breakers and all of this situated. And also addressing dirty electricity in terms of the motors that are chosen for the machinery in the house. And I'm just going to briefly touch on that, but no dimmers. Instead, use regular on-off switches. Light bulbs is really an issue, and this raises a critical situation, which is that energy efficient is right now not the same as low EMF, and this needs to be addressed. So that's going to require our business organizations to be addressing this with the companies so that they can make safer technology. A lot of the new LEDs, they're getting better, but the recommendation from building biologists is they really need to be tested in terms of flicker and blue light, as well as harmonics, which would be sometimes called dirty electricity, where you have different frequencies running on the line. And so addressing solar power inverters with high quality filters, which is another issue that absolutely has to be addressed. So I know people who have special filtering, especially for what they have in their home, having a power strip, and I talked about some of these. So I just was going to end here and say that there needs to be professional measurements when you do shielding and mitigation, because you can have a situation where you think you're shielding from a source, but you're actually reflecting from a source that's over here, which you're not aware of. And if you have a $200 meter or even a $500 meter, which is better than the more less expensive ones, you're not going to catch everything that's going on. Sometimes you really have to analyze more completely the situation before shielding. I have a lot of concerns about using shielding paint in situations where people are not fully educated, and they might put shielding paint on and then walk in with their cell phone. So their cell phone's going to go to high power when you have you got this low signal because you just shielded your entire bedroom. So that's why if you can make the bedroom be a place, but when you shield it, it has to be, you can't be using wireless in it. And again, we recommend professional support in that always. And the Institute for Building Biology, I have the website there, buildingbiologyinstitute.org. And electricians with EMF expertise, I would recommend as a resource.
In the 1930s, they said asbestos was safe. In the 1950s, they said tobacco was safe. In the 1960s, they said DDT was safe. From the 2000s, they say cell phones are safe. Today, they say 5G is safe.
5G is potentially much more dangerous, and it needs to be tested.
It will be everywhere.